contribution. And there, there is this identity that also desires growth and contribution. But then we have this conditioned self on the driver's seat, and this guy is really not about growth. This guy really is afraid of what it doesn't know. It's afraid of anything new. This is the one that is scared to change jobs, that the one that would rather stay in a job that is where you're not doing well, but you just stay there because you know about it. And for most of us, the conditioned self is the louder voice. It's very loud, and it's showing up in a lot of situations. And then there is this little voice. It's actually where our potential resides. I call it the giant. Not because it is already a giant, but because it has the potential to be a giant, and in order to, so we have these voices always going on, and primarily listening to the one, to the conditioned self, which is really keeping us stuck. But in order to sort out the dialogue, we really have to become the observer of the dialogue, right? We have to disidentify from any of both voices and become the observer. And this is when we notice, hey, I have this job interview going on and I'm really scared. And if you learn to disidentify with your thinking, this is then when the change really starts. And once you have sorted out this inner conflict, when you listen to your self one or self two, and you can separate both, then you can actually also make a conscious decision on what voice you are going to follow. Do I want to grow? Am I going to listen to that small voice, to that intuition? That's what intuition really is about. Or do I want to follow, the conditioned self, which always will lead to the same results, just in different context?
So could you call the conditioned self the ego?
Exactly. I think there are a lot of names for it. Galway is calling them self one and self two. I would actually call the self one the ego, the conditioned identity,
because it's there to protect us. It's
exactly
there. It's comfortable, staying in the job that I'm not doing great in, but it's more comfortable than the scary uncertainty of stepping out into the work, into the unemployment game, where I could go all over the place. I might not get a job, it might be worse, it might not, I might be a horrible boss, all that uncertainty. So keeping us stuck in that comfort zone keeps us stuck in the comfort zone. And then of course the other thing that the ego is after is significance and connection. And that significance is always, so in sports, is questioning, did I do that right? How can I get better at it? Who's gonna I'd say I look at it, significance is sort of that outside validation. So winning the prize, winning the gold medal, getting myself in the newspaper. But the ego has that louder voice, doesn't it? But it's actually not helping us to do the two things that you said there, the growth and the contribution, because we have to always keep growing. If we're not, we're dying, because the world, everything's moving on. So we can't sit still. If you sit in the middle of a train track, you'll get run over eventually by the train. But it's uncomfortable moving into that growth, that listening to that. But it's a bit scary listening to that, the giant. I think I would have said a bit more. gentle giant. It's a giant, but it's there, but it's
like
sort of, it's
with a positive.
yeah, absolutely. But it's not, it's sort of overlaid by, overwhelmed by this little wee self one with the loud voice.
Exactly.
So like full of hot air. And I think so in this book, in playing golf, I worked with some golfers a few years ago, and it's always you hit the ball and then you question, should I do it like this, that there's a breeze here that's going to move the ball, and if I twist my body a little bit like this, or I loosen the grip a bit like this, and that's our ego, that's our self one, putting all this stuff into place.
Yeah,
but that means that we're thinking about it.
Exactly. It's the ego is really about being conscious about everything. What it tries to do is to control everything.
Yes.
And this this desire really, if you boil it down, comes through insecurities. Why does it want to control the weather? Why does it want to control any outside condition? Because it really is insecure that it can handle anything, and the thing is, we can't control everything. We can't control our outside conditions. Talking about sports, if you're at a tournament, you really can't control anything despite your own self, right?
Yes.
So, but the ego fears so much, and a lot of energy is wasted to attempt to control. But in the end, all this energy gets wasted, and it should have been really channeled into a different direction. So a more productive direction, a direction which actually leads to success. And that's, kind of channeling it beyond the ego. And what the self too, if you start, of course, it's, it's scary. Why is it scary? Because it's unfamiliar terrain. I don't know, how do you pronounce it?
Terrain.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. It's unfamiliar because we have lived through the ego for so long. So it's, it's about making baby steps, making experiments with the self beyond the ego. And once we do make the first steps, then we get a feedback from life. And it's not about control. The self beyond the ego, the giant, is really about, the giant is a giant because he knows he can handle anything. He doesn't care about the weather because he knows, if it's rainy, well, then I just put my raincoat on and I still perform and I be out there. And
so how could that translate into business? If I'm on the sports field, if I'm golfing, it's really about closing the ego off and just hitting the ball. But in business, it's sort of similar. But explain a bit about that balance, because you get so much in your head, your emotions start to come up in business, and then you don't get the right relationships. I think mastering your emotions and mastering your relationships are so important in life.
yes.
But in business, just as important, being able to master your emotions, but possibly in business, maybe mastering your relationships, because you've got the people above you, unless you own the company. And then even then you've got relationships with suppliers, with peers, with networking.
Exactly, yes.
Right through there, you've got that relationship. So how does this come up in business or in life? This self one, the self two. I know ego's always there, isn't it? But to let it go, to let that fear go, to step into that uncertainty. I think one of the things I remember about uncertainty, it's comfortable in uncertainty. When I'm sitting there, I know it's going to happen. It's comfortable. There's not too much pressure. I can go to work and I know the job, and that. The problem there is that you're not growing. You're stagnating.
It's comfortable.
And there's no learning. Yeah, it's comfortable. There's no learning done when you're sitting in that certainty, in that comfort zone. To step out of it is what the ego is resisting. But how do you that comes up in business? So how does that balance in business, do you think?
I mean, from my experience, there is, of course, my personal experience that I just shared. If you're in a leadership position and you're always hitting the same salary, for example. But also I've worked with people in leadership positions in the middle management, and they have a lot of stuff going on. They have their peers, they have someone above them, and of course their team. And a lot of those guys are really stressed, because especially now in this environment where we have a work environment which is constantly changing. Right now, it is crazy, what's going on. Companies had to adapt to Corona. Now we have this war going on, which is affecting so much. And a lot of the pressure shoots directly to people in middle management positions, because they basically, in their company, they can affect everyone. And now you have, let's imagine you have somebody who is who is living through the ego, who tries to control everything in such an environment. Can you imagine the stress that this person has? Yeah. So this is where the inner game really plays a crucial role with how to manage stress in uncertainty. You talked about it. It's we live in uncertainty, and when you're trying to control everything, but the real environment really is uncertain, then this creates a lot of stress. So in my coaching, I try to help those leadership people to sort this out and really become aware of their inner dialogue, because this is where it starts. If you have a conflict within yourself, then on the second level of relationships, this is going to represent, if you have a conflict within yourself, you have a conflict also with other people. And, on one-on-one relationships. And then also you see that in companies, when there is a lot of conflict in the relationships between leaders and their team, this is going to affect the company culture. And you can think this further and further. If you have leaders who are really about stagnation because they fear uncertainty, if you have leaders who really want to be comfortable, they want to have, their monthly paycheck, and they're not about growth and contribution, then this will show up in the company's results. And, just imagine it. If you have like 5 leadership positions in a company, and all of those leadership positions are run by leaders who primarily live through the ego, then I don't think the company will grow a lot, because they're not able to handle uncertainty. They're not willing to step out of the comfort zone. And as you already said, only outside of what's comfortable to us, there is the party going. This is where growth happens. This is where we find meaning and fulfillment.
It's quite hard, that, isn't it, to if you're in a business, so you're middle management, you're going to have metrics, KPIs to reach. There's going to be levels that you have to reach, and we end up getting tied into those details, and we focus down. And it's a funny way the mind works. We focus on the details to get the numbers. That's something I can measure. But when you start talking about intuition and even leadership, a great extent, it's really hard to measure. So if I'm in sales, I get X dollars per quarter or whatever it is. That's really measurable. And I focus on the details, and I lose the intuition because you can't measure it. And leadership, you can't measure it. It's really difficult. When I was working in Myanmar, I worked in a hotel, and we had, in 2 years, we had, so I had 40 staff. We had one turnover, one person in 2 years, 40 staff, which was actually, when I talked to other Burmese companies, they didn't believe me. No, that's not how it happens. It's at minimum 25% turnover per annum.
Yeah.
So they lost track of, and there's lots of different things that are going into that, that dynamic, obviously, but just that, because when you're, and I like that when you say when you're stressed, your relationships take on the same stress. So we say, you know, the outer world reflects the inner world. What's happening within you, your stress is there just because you personally can't reach the figures, or you're personally, this is too much, it's getting outside my comfort zone. And then it's in the way that you relate to your peers or the people below you and the people above you. So every relationship you're going to have, that stress is coming out, because only about 10% of our communication is verbal, what we say. All this other communication that's going on that's non-verbal, and that person that I'm talking to, or that meeting that I'm at, they're picking up this non-verbal communication unconsciously. We're way back at the start there, that the self one, the self two, the unconscious can deal with thousands of things, and most of it's just we're not consciously aware of it. So you go into a meeting, and if you're stressed because you're not meeting the figures, how are you going to come across in the meeting? And I think in Myanmar, because they were absolutely in Myanmar, because they were still learning all these things, they were very much on a personal level. So the personality comes out. They really are still learning about their emotions. They're still learning about their relationships. They would go into a meeting and just let it all fall out on the table. And if it was okay, if there was a balance there, then everybody was happy, and you know, we had a comfortable working environment. If they were stressed because the company was losing money, then that's what would come out, and everybody at the table would be stressed, and then you've effectively given them your stress, and they go back to their divisions and they give that stress to their, so the whole company is just got this depressed nature to it. And
Yeah.
as a leader especially, it's more about that unconscious communication, but making sure that you're aware of the way that you're interacting. So you're aware of the way that you go into relationships. I mean, before relationships, it's that the aware of your emotions. And I think when we say relationships, the first, probably the most important person to have a relationship with is yourself. You know, when you've got the right relationship with yourself, you can then have the right relationship with other people that you're interacting with.
That's it.
And leadership in business is, it doesn't have to, it never has to be just the guy in the big chair sitting at the top of the table. It can be everybody. And I think what I tried to do, I tell this story a few times, but when I started, it was actually a cruise riverboat. So 5-star, really high level. I mean, it was $600-700 a night for the cheaper room. So it wasn't a cheap outlet. So we had to perform. So the first thing I did when I went on board, there was the 3 women on the front desk, and I said to them, right, so I was the director. I said, my job now is to teach you to take my job. And they didn't understand that. It just wasn't a concept that they'd ever come across before. It took a little while, it took a few days for them to recognize that. And then, so my whole approach was that I need to bring them up. So not put them into uncertainty, but definitely give them growth. And of course, that has a wider effect. You know, they go home to their families, and they take you don't switch it off at the door. They take that attitude with them when they go home. So, you know, the ripple effect, if you like, has tremendous effect. And anywhere in the world, even though we're in the West, if you're in Asia or in the States, it's that how you react to somebody will be how they react to other people.
exactly.
Really, really interesting.
It's you never know, when you start changing with your inner dialogue, as a coach, a sports coach, or in my context as a leader, it's going to affect other people consciously or unconsciously. And this is so great, because people, especially now, they look for leaders. People want orientation in life. They automatically look for someone to lead them, because it's much more familiar to people to be led than to step up and lead. And now when you find somebody who really knows how to handle himself, how to handle stress, then this puts you automatically in a spot where people will look up to you. But now in a company setting, the thing is, you have a lot of positional authorities, like they are there because they know more than their team. And those people, despite their knowledge, not always are great leaders. They have the title, but they don't have the ability. Yeah. And this also affects their team. I always say the leader, you can say also, maybe what you can tell me if that also applies to sports and to coaches, but I always say the leader is the lid of the team. And I have seen it through my own experience, and also with the people that I've already worked with. The leader and how he manages himself, this will directly affect, in a bad way or in a good way, it doesn't matter. It's going to affect the team. And when you have a leader who, as you said, starts to have a great relationship with himself, sorts out the inner conflict between the both conditioned self and the giant, then this has a really good effect on the team performance as well. Because you have a leader now who knows how to handle stress, who steps out into uncertainty and is all about growth, who also puts up those figures, and says like, okay, this month we're gonna hit this target. But then instead of listening to the inner voice who is really saying, no, I don't think we can hit this target, you better stay where you are and look for excuses, then you have a leader who says like, okay, we're gonna hit this target. We don't know how to get there because we've never been there, but we're sure there is a way, and we're gonna figure it out together as a team.
I think that's one of the things if you set KPIs like that, you set figures, right? This is in golf, this is the score I'm going to go for. You're setting a goal that's too far ahead. For me in a business, so if I have a team, it's right, this is what we want to get to. That's our objective. And let's break it down to each one in the team. How are you going to get there? So start to break those goals down so that they're shorter term. So in golf, it's not, I'm going to get, subpar or I'm going to get one or two over, or it's actually breaking it down to the next step. If we think too far ahead, those goals are just, they sit in the ether almost. They're sort of like, okay, it's a little bit of a sort of a, yes, pie in the sky sort of thing. But if I'm playing golf, right, the next strike, what do I need to do to get the best strike in the next time I hit the ball? And then in business, it's similar. It's actually breaking it down so that each person individually, and I think it's important because then each person in the team individually knows where they want to go, and and then working with them so that they can individually take responsibility.
Yes,
I think that's quite
a very
important.
crucial part.
It's getting people to understand you're part of a team, but individually you've got to take responsibility for your position. So if you're in a team game like football, everybody plays a crucial part, whether it's the goalkeeper or the striker. They have different technical, physical abilities, but they all have to take responsibility for the team to achieve the outcome they want. But if your leader is putting it too far ahead, I was just thinking when you were saying there, they sort of the boss puts up the KPIs, and then he sort of does this with his hand. That's sort of body language to say that's the KPI, but I don't really think we're going to get.
they want us to hit the target, you know. So you better do it. Otherwise, I don't get my my recognition as a leader. And he just puts the pressure on the team. This is that's happening like every day in companies.
Yeah, that's management, not leadership, isn't it? Managing expectations.
Yes. I think we have a lot of managers actually, but we don't have a lot of leaders. Leaders, as you described, it's one thing to put a goal there, but it's another thing to translate this goal that you want to reach at the end of the month, to translate this goal into action right now. And it takes a leader to construct a framework where everyone in the team is willing to take the responsibility and willingness. So it's also about, is the team really inspired to hit the target? The leader is basically providing a pathway for the teammates in order to answer the most important question. Why? What is in there for me, Why should I reach this target? Why should I help my boss? Why should I help the team to hit this target? And a manager really comes in there after that. A manager comes in there when the target is set and has to translate it into daily actions and then distribute it among the team members. But the framework in which the manager can operate effectively is set by the leader. And often you have managers, but you don't have leaders. So you have targets, and then comes in the manager, and he's just about hitting the target. He's not about trying to zap into the potential that there is in the team, to look, what is the individual motivation of the team members to be here, and how can I tap into that in order to benefit the greater good? And that takes a leader.
I think we see that often, don't we, where people are really good at the technical part of the job, and because they're so good, they get pushed up to the management role. And being a manager is the technical part, but being a leader is actually a totally different career. Being able to pull out from the team members, how can I get the best potential out of that person? But if you've got 10 people in the team, they're all going to be different. So the story I was telling you about before there, where I moved onto the cruise boat, there was 3 women on the front desk, and it was completely different techniques and work I had to do with them to get the best potential. And they all had really good skills, but they're all quite different in what they could do. Now, ultimately, as a manager, or as a leader as well, even more so, you've got to have so many skills. So I don't think you don't have to, as a leader, know how to do the job, the technical skills. In sports, the coach of a football team doesn't have to have played in an international to be able to coach the team to play internationally. It's another step up. if I was talking about golf, it would be looking at something with soft eyes. So rather than getting into the detail, it's actually understanding how that team can work together, how the different parts of the team can work together, how you can bring out the potential, as you were saying, in each individual, so that the sum of 11 players on the football field is greater than 11.
Yeah.
But that's a real talent, that leadership skill. And I've said it before, it's really, for me, the coach, the leadership position is understanding the self to then understand other people. Stephen Covey says it quite well, seek to understand before you're understood. And that's using your two ears in one mouth, speaking in that ratio.
Yes.
To learn the depth. And then I suppose it's in what you've been saying, it's stepping back to listen to that gentle giant, to understand yourself, but understand the other person as well. Because motivation it's not figures, it's not KPIs. It's actually understanding it's helping them understand, because you never could, but it's helping them understand their why.
Yes.
To
100%.
bring that out of them. It's
as a leader, when I mentioned before, when you step into the being the observer, disidentify with what you're thinking you are, because right now the huge amount of our population still is identified 100% with the ego, and the ego really is about itself. The ego seeks itself. If you have a leader identified completely with the ego, he doesn't care about the team, and this is because he really seeks himself, which is, I don't blame it. It's just conditioning. This is how we as human beings are. But when you now learn to step out of the ego, become the observer, you notice, okay, I have a different choice. And the funny thing is, when I witnessed that in my own life, I started to listen. That was the first thing that I noticed. I started to listen to other people. I reflected their self-talk, basically, because language, you become much more aware of the language patterns that we're running. And when you do that with your own life, you also become aware of, other people's lives. And now you can help them to basically do the same. Step out of the ego, become the observer, and choose a different, basically a different identity, so to say. And with choosing a different identity, you're choosing a different life. You mentioned that earlier, how we're making that inner choice, that's going to show up in the outer world, and I think this is, as a coach or as a leader, that's what it's really about. But it starts with you, it doesn't start. So if I'm always very passionate to talk to leaders about just this point, because they come for coaching to me, and they complain, basically. They complain about their own boss, they complain about their peers, and they complain about the team. And then I just say, well, it starts with you. If you want to fix your team, then fix yourself, because you're the lid. If you want to increase the performance of your team in sports, well, then increase your own performance as a coach. Work on yourself, your own motivation. Why are you doing this at all? Do you seek recognition for yourself, or do you seek growth and also contribution? If you're only there for recognition, then it's really all about you, and this is not going to inspire your team. Yeah. So as a coach, it's very crucial to learn to disidentify from the ego and to choose the gentle giant, as you now branded it.
I like that. It's big, it's there, but it gets overwhelmed by the ego, because the ego's got such a loud voice. That conscious brain is, oh no, you don't want to hit the ball there. Last time it went there, it went that well. Or like we were saying the other day, if you're playing with a buddy in golf, the worst thing you can say to help their game is watch out for the water, because their focus goes to the water. You know, where your focus goes, your energy goes. And try as you can consciously not to think about it. Your unconscious is like, oh, there's water, oh, there's, and what happens is the ball goes that way. I was just thinking then when you were saying that about complaining, and our mentor Peter Sage says that complaining is the glue that keeps you stuck there, stuck in the past. And I think the ego, because of the comfort zone, it wants to, it knows the past, and we spend most of our lives in the past. And a lot of that is because complaining when I don't like it. We have about 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, and more than 90% of them are what we had yesterday. So it's the patterns that we run keep us stuck in the past. And as a
100%.
manager, if you're still stuck in the past, then that's where you're going to stay, so that your inner world is this didn't work, and you can't get into intuition if you're stuck back there. And yeah, absolutely 100%. To be a leader, you have to recognize that it's me that has to get out of this stuck in what happened. And it's not easy. It's a process. We're on a journey to actually start to, how can I change? I'm fascinated with the question, why do we do what we do? And it's this, we do it, we get stuck in the past because of the patterns that we run. And it's only been recently in the last couple of decades that they've come up with this. They've in neuroscience, they've realized that the brain is neuroplastic, so it has a neuroplasticity. The brain isn't formed when we're really young. Our character is when we're sort of maybe pre 6, 7 years of age, when we're still very much in a theta wavelength. We're at a lower frequency. Children sleep a lot because they're dreaming. But that's when our characters form, but we're not stuck in that character. We're not stuck in that mindset. It can be changed. But then as we get older, we sort of, you know, we get the job, we start to get up in the company, but we sort of tend to look at the negative. And then you turn the news on and it's CNN. What do they call it? Constant negative news. Your mind gets stuck in that negativity, and that's another pattern, and it's a pattern that overrides everything. So to be a real leader, you have to, I recognize that, and then B, how do I step out of it to actually start to tap into my intuition, not look at the negatives all the time. And I think, and I agree, the first thing that you notice is the languaging that you use, just the words that we use. And this is an unconscious thing. The conscious, because it can only deal with a few things at once, it doesn't process everything that's coming out of the unconscious. And the structure, the words that we use tend to reflect what's happening on the inside. So one of the things that'd be great Monday morning when you go into work or you go onto the golf course is to notice that what's happening with you, but notice what's happening with the people around you. Is that a peer group that you want to stick with? Now you've got to stay with your job because they're the colleagues at work or other people you play golf with. But are they creating a stronger sense of who you are? Because it sort of falls back. It falls back on the meaning and the beliefs that we have about the game that we're playing, the business that we're in, and about ourselves. So I think beliefs are really important, and that the unconscious, the neuroplasticity comes in so that we can change our unconscious to become more positive. And that's, okay, COVID's there, the war's there, now that they have a new virus out, but I can let that affect me, or I can stop it affecting me, because that's wasted energy. Worrying about catching the virus is just, it's where my focus ends up. So how much of my focus is worrying about the virus and what's happening in the world, which I can't change, that I could be spending on my job or my next round of golf. So beliefs, we haven't touched on beliefs and values, but I think they're quite important on recognizing what they are. Most people never look at what they really believe. They're molded by the outside.
Yeah, as you said, it's about we're unconscious. We're running through life on autopilot. That's what it is. And we are wondering why we always end up with the same situations, basically, just maybe in different context. You know, as I said, you know, I changed countries, but I didn't change myself. I changed jobs, but I didn't change myself. And I was always ending up with the same things. And this is because, so I consciously choose a different job, yes. But there was so much in my unconscious that was causing my behavior, that was causing you know, everything that I then experienced in those jobs. And you know, you previously mentioned it, how the inner game really is causing the outer game. So if you look at your life, then this is merely a reflection. This is merely the effect of what's true within yourself. And this is where we got to
that we keep running, isn't it? We don't consciously think about the patterns, but we just keep running the same patterns.
Yeah,
it's
we're so, you know, as human beings, we're so intelligent, but most people, they just run their patterns the whole life, and it's not even their patterns as if they have chosen those patterns. It's conditioned. They picked it up. And as you stated as well, the ego really is about the past. The patterns, that's nothing new. If you really, in growth, just the word, look at the word, you know, growth really means you're getting somewhere you haven't been yet. So the ego, because it's conditioned by the past, can't get you to a new place. If you want to have experienced new places, if you really want to reach in sports new destinations, you know, better performances, then you got to disidentify from the ego and learn to live with your gentle giant who really, where all the potential resides. And once you pick up that game, I promise you, you will never stop doing this, because there's so much about ourselves that we don't know about. We're unconscious.
Yep.
We're not consciously aware of our own potential. And it's an experiment, you know, try yourself out. And sadly, a lot of people are much more, are really addicted to their own insecurities of what they fear. You know, they try to control the weather, basically. They try to control COVID. They try to control, you know, their teams or their bosses. But that's not gonna help them to advance in their life. That's not going to help them grow.
It restricts you, doesn't it? It keeps you stuck in the comfort zone. It doesn't help that growth, and it restricts you. You can't, when you're listening to your ego, you can't listen to the intuition. And I know in sports, the best results are when the team switches the conscious mind off, or when you're in golf, when you're
so
stepping up to hit the ball. Or cricket's exactly the same as golf, actually. When the ball's coming down, you need to be 100% focused on that moment. But, so I could say with soft eyes, you're not, I'm going to do this and I'm going to pull this way and the wind blew this way. If you start to get consciously there, you're restricting it. And it's in sports, it's called flow. Once you're in flow, the conscious mind isn't speaking. It's just the intuitive self that is coming through. And in business, when you've got when you're brainstorming is where it comes out mostly. You can't brainstorm if you're thinking, because you're thinking about the how am I, no, we can't do that. No, we can't do that. And so it restricts you. You can't step into the intuitive nature. You won't get that left field idea that is going to make a huge difference to the project. And then individually in relationships, to be able to step into that flow moment, that relationship dynamic is going to change. You're going to get a lot more out of it, because you're not thinking. Normally when we're talking, it's all, so if I'm talking to somebody, I'm thinking about what I'm going to answer, how I'm going to answer. My story is more important. All my stuff, so I'm not listening. All my stuff is there, and that affects the dynamic of the relationship. And that's why Stephen Covey says, seek to understand before you're understood. You really actively listen, or even better is to reflectively listen. You know, in a group, Simon Sinek says, you're in the group, the leader speaks last. So that he's really listening, and it's not just sort of distracted listening or unfocused. It's really reflectively thinking and processing what the person's saying,
and not thinking about like
what you're going to say, because that's your ego. But to be able to, it's a hard, you can't get rid of the ego. The ego is part of your character, it's who you are. The challenge is having that balance, I suppose, between the gentle giant and the ego, so that they each have a say.
It's about choice, basically. As you said, I was thinking about, can we really get rid of the ego? I don't think so either, but you can choose to walk a different path. And this is why it's so, it's, you know, the ego is a part of who you are, but it's just a fraction. It's very, 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 very small. But for most people, it's all that they are. They identify with the ego. And so this is why I stress it so much. You know, you've got to basically listen to your own thinking, you know, watch your self-talk, and disidentify from the ego. Okay, just listen to yourself. Well, I messed this one up, I didn't hit the target. And what are you saying then to yourself? And then to disidentify and just to say, okay, that's my ego talking to myself. You can become the observer of you. This is something that the consciousness, which is inherent to our our nature as human beings, we can become conscious of ourselves. That's unique to humans, and we have to learn to disidentify from who we think we are, and then choose a different path. So
and I think our ego is, I last time I went into that meeting, I didn't do so well. So we're reinforcing the pattern. I didn't do so well is the history. So what are you going to do when you walk into the next meeting, the one you're about to go into? You're going to take all that stuff with you, and the meeting's going to turn out the same. You're running a similar pattern. You're reinforcing it like an onion. You're putting more layers on it, and it's not easy to actually to put that aside. And I know with sports, one of the things we do with sports is they have that game face. So when they go onto the field, they are in a certain character, and it takes a bit to build that up, because you really you can't get rid of the ego. The ego's there. The trouble is it might be small, but it has a really loud voice. Yes, it needs to be listened to now and then, but you need to actually have something in place that can counterbalance it. So in sports, you might have a game face where your 100% focus is on the field. In business, you would do the same thing, especially with presenting. You can do all these tricks to sort of put yourself in a better sort of frame of mind to go on stage. But if your ego's still there, it's going to be disjointed. It's going to be sort of bits will pop out, and so your presence on the stage won't be. Like what's coming up for me is that lots of people say, you know, I am the boss, I am a doctor, I am a parent. To go on stage to speak or to present in front of the board, it's just I am.
Yes, with no label.
With no label. And it's really because the ego wants to jump in and say, oh no, I am the boss, I am the manager, I am the opener in the cricket.
Yeah, or I am the failure. How does the failure perform in a job interview?
Yep.
Well, it's going to do what it's supposed to do. You know,
Yeah.
it's going to fail.
It's the louder voice. Thomas, this has been really great chatting to you. We could go on, but we're just about out of time. So in 2 sentences,
really great.
The inner game.
There is an outer game, if there is an inner game, and learn to become the observer of yourself. And this is going to be the most magnificent thing that has happened in your life. I can tell you from my own experience. When you start to notice that there is so much more within yourself that you just haven't been aware of, then life is going to change for the better.
It's always there, isn't it? But we run those patterns.
There.
It's becoming the observer. Yes, becoming aware of what's happening, and then you become aware of what you do, the patterns, and then you can change them. And life can. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. All right, Thomas, we're out of time. This has been really fantastic. Well, I was sort of a bit worried. It's a great book. It was written quite a few decades ago. How are we going to fill out 45 minutes? But I need to stop it because it's at 60 minutes. Everyone will get. Everyone's got other things to do. So Thomas, thank you very much. And
thank you, John. It has been a real pleasure. Yeah, likewise.